J.D. Vance had never imagined he would be standing in front of the royal palace of Eloria, a small but proud kingdom known for its old traditions and disciplined soldiers. The streets were lined with people who had come to catch a glimpse of the foreign visitor. Flags waved in the air, children held tiny banners, and the sun shone brightly, making the golden details of the palace sparkle. J.D. adjusted his tie and took a deep breath. He wanted this visit to be perfect. The black car he had arrived in slowed down near the palace gates. J.D. stepped out carefully, making sure his shoes were polished and his suit was straight. The moment felt almost unreal. He had spoken to large crowds before, given important speeches, and met many leaders, but this felt different. There was a calm, serious energy around the palace that reminded him of how important first impressions were. J.D. waved to the crowd, and they waved back. Some people shouted greetings in the Elorian language. J.D. smiled politely and nodded. He had spent the last few days preparing for this visit. He had learned a few phrases in Elorian to greet the Queen, studied the country's history, and read stories about the bravery of its soldiers. He wanted to show respect and understanding, even if he knew he might have made mistakes in past statements about foreign armies. Ahead of him, at the main entrance, stood a tall royal guard. His name was Liam. Liam had been a guard for nearly 10 years, and in that time he had never once faltered in his duty. He wore a crisp uniform with shiny buttons, a polished sword at his side, and a tall hat that made him look even more serious. Liam's eyes were focused and steady, scanning the crowd but always aware of the visitors who approached the palace. J.D. walked slowly toward the gate, extending his hand in greeting. He had practiced this moment in his mind many times. He imagined a warm handshake, a smile, and a friendly introduction. But when he reached Liam, he noticed something unusual. Liam's expression was unreadable, but there was a clear firmness in his stance. He did not move his hand, and he did not acknowledge J.D.'s gesture in the way J.D. expected. J.D. stopped for a moment, surprised. He cleared his throat and tried again, saying, "Hello, I am J.D. Vance. It is an honor to meet you." Liam's eyes flicked briefly to J.D., and then he remained completely still. J.D. could feel the silence around them. The crowd had noticed the interaction and had grown quiet. People exchanged curious looks, wondering why the handshake had not happened. J.D.'s confident smile faded slightly. He had expected a courteous greeting, not this strict refusal. J.D. took a step back, unsure of what to do next. He remembered that he had recently spoken about foreign armies in a speech, words that might have offended some people in Eloria. Perhaps Liam had heard about it. J.D. was not used to seeing such strong reactions, but he quickly reminded himself that respect was earned differently in every culture. In Eloria, tradition mattered, manners mattered, loyalty mattered more than charm or confidence. The Queen's carriage approached, and a royal attendant opened the door. J.D. straightened his posture and followed the attendant's gesture to enter the palace. As he walked, he stole a glance at Liam. The guard's expression remained unchanged. There was no anger, but there was also no warmth. J.D. realized he would need to be careful with his words and actions during this visit. First impressions were not easily fixed, but second chances could be earned. Inside the palace, J.D. was led through a long corridor with high ceilings and large windows. Sunlight poured in, creating patterns of light and shadow on the polished marble floor. Portraits of past rulers and soldiers adorned the walls. Each one seemed to tell a story of bravery, loyalty, and duty. J.D. could feel the history of Eloria pressing around him. He tried to remember everything he had learned about the kingdom and its people. The corridor opened into a grand hall. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling, glittering with hundreds of crystals. Golden details lined the walls, and a red carpet stretched across the floor. The hall was filled with the quiet hum of palace activity. Servants moved gracefully, carrying trays with refreshments, while other attendants adjusted decorations and prepared for the Queen's arrival. J.D. took in the scene with awe. Everything seemed larger than life, but he reminded himself to remain humble and attentive. Finally, the Queen arrived. She was dressed in a simple but elegant gown, with a crown that shone under the chandeliers. Her smile was warm, but her eyes were sharp and observant. She greeted J.D. politely, and J.D. bowed slightly as he had been taught. "Welcome to Eloria, Mr. Vance," she said in a calm, melodic voice. "We are honored to have you here." J.D. felt a wave of relief. The Queen's demeanor was kind, and her presence seemed to calm some of the tension he had felt outside. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he replied. "It is an honor to be here in your beautiful kingdom." He spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully. He wanted to show respect and avoid any misunderstanding. As they walked together through the palace, the queen explained the history of Eloria. She spoke of the brave soldiers who had defended the kingdom for centuries, the traditions that guided the royal family, and the ceremonies that honored loyalty and service. JD listened attentively, genuinely fascinated. He realized that he had a lot to learn about this country. Respect could not be demanded with words alone. It had to be shown through understanding and curiosity. Liam, the royal guard, followed at a distance, keeping a careful eye on JD. The guard had seen many visitors over the years, but he had learned to judge character quickly. Something about JD's initial approach had not impressed him, but he watched closely as JD listened and asked questions. Slowly, Liam began to notice that JD's attitude was changing. There was genuine interest, not arrogance. There was respect, not dismissal. JD asked the queen about the daily lives of her soldiers, about their training, their routines, and the values they held dear. The queen's eyes brightened. She appreciated his curiosity and attentiveness. "Our soldiers are not just trained to protect the kingdom," she explained. "They are trained to honor it, to respect every citizen, and to serve with integrity." JD nodded thoughtfully. He realized that every country had its own way of teaching courage and loyalty, and he admired this approach. As they continued through the hall, JD felt the weight of his earlier misstep at the entrance. The failed handshake was still fresh in his mind. He knew that first impressions were powerful, but he also understood that every moment afterward could help repair them. He resolved to listen more, speak carefully, and show his respect through action rather than words alone. The first part of the visit had been challenging, but JD was determined to make the most of it. The palace was more than just a building. It was a symbol of Eloria's pride, history, and values. Every step he took reminded him that diplomacy was not only about speeches and handshakes. It was about understanding, patience, and showing genuine respect for the people and traditions of another land. By the time the queen led him to the palace garden, JD felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. The garden was full of blooming flowers, neatly trimmed hedges, and sparkling fountains. Birds chirped softly, adding a peaceful soundtrack to the royal surroundings. JD took a moment to breathe in the fresh air and admire the beauty around him. He knew that the day was far from over, and that the real test of his visit was just beginning. As JD walked through the garden behind the queen, he glanced at Liam again. The guard's posture remained perfect, his gaze steady, but there was a hint of curiosity in his eyes now. JD felt a small spark of hope. Perhaps there was a chance to earn the respect he had not received at the gate. JD understood that this visit was not just about formal greetings. It was about showing that he was willing to learn, to listen, and to connect with the people of Eloria. JD Vance followed the queen through the winding paths of the palace garden. The sunlight shone through the leaves, casting a soft glow over the cobblestone walkways. Fountains gurgled quietly nearby, and the gentle scent of roses filled the air. Birds flew from tree to tree, singing in the crisp morning. It was a beautiful and calm place, but JD could still feel the tension from the handshake at the palace gate. Liam, the tall royal guard, walked a few steps behind them, silent and steady. JD tried not to look at him, but he could feel the guard's eyes. Liam had not greeted him when he arrived, and his refusal to shake hands had left JD confused and slightly embarrassed. JD had traveled to many countries, met many officials, and greeted countless guards, but he had never felt a refusal so clearly. He realized that in Eloria, gestures mattered more than words, and respect was earned through actions, not titles or speeches. JD decided he would approach the situation carefully. He wanted to show that he was sincere, respectful, and willing to learn. He thought about the words he had spoken in his past speech about foreign armies. Those words had been careless, and perhaps they had reached the ears of Liam. JD wanted to make it clear that he admired bravery and dedication in all soldiers, not just his own country's. As they walked, the queen spoke about her soldiers and their training. "Our army is not only strong in skill, but strong in character," she explained. "They are taught to protect the kingdom and its people, but also to respect everyone they encounter. Loyalty, courage, and respect are equally important." JD nodded, listening intently. He had always believed that soldiers were brave, but he realized there was more to their role than he had imagined. JD's curiosity grew as he asked questions. "How do you train your soldiers?" he asked. "Do they learn teamwork or do they focus mainly on strategy?" The Queen smiled at his question. "Both," she replied. "We train them in strategy, but we also teach them the value of teamwork and honor. A soldier without honor is no soldier at all. Each must understand the responsibility they carry for the kingdom and its people." Liam, standing behind, seemed to listen quietly. JD could see the muscles in the guard's jaw tighten slightly. It was as if he was evaluating every word JD spoke. JD did not know whether Liam would remain distant or if he could earn his trust. JD decided to speak carefully, sharing stories of travels to other lands and encounters with soldiers there. He spoke about lessons he had learned, mistakes he had made, and how he had come to respect all armies equally. JD noticed Liam's eyes shifting ever so slightly. The guard had not yet smiled or softened, but there was a flicker of acknowledgement. JD knew he had to continue showing sincerity. "I understand now," he said, "that soldiers are more than their weapons. They carry responsibility, courage, and pride in every action. I respect that deeply." Liam did not respond immediately, but JD could sense a slight shift in the guard's stance. The Queen guided them to a small pavilion in the garden, where chairs were arranged under the shade of tall trees. Refreshments were brought, and JD took a seat politely. Liam remained standing, as was his duty, but JD could see the guard observing carefully. JD realized that earning respect was not just about gestures, it was about understanding and patience. He had to show respect not only through words but also through his actions and demeanor. JD began to speak about his childhood and early experiences. He told the Queen about the values he had learned growing up, the lessons about honesty, hard work, and respect for others. The Queen listened intently, and JD felt encouraged to continue. He realized that the best way to connect was not by impressing anyone with achievements, but by showing genuine character and integrity. Liam shifted slightly, still standing, still silent, but there was a noticeable tension that JD could sense. He understood that Liam was trained to protect the Queen and the palace, but also to evaluate visitors. Every gesture, every word mattered. JD thought carefully before speaking again. He spoke about times when he had learned from mistakes and about how he had come to appreciate the courage and dedication of people who served others. The Queen nodded as he spoke. "It is not easy to admit mistakes and learn from them," she said. "It takes courage to reflect and grow. That is why respect is earned, not given lightly. You are learning well, Mr. Vance." JD felt a small sense of relief. He knew he was making progress, even if it was slow. He understood that Liam's judgment would not change immediately, but every honest word and respectful action mattered. JD asked the Queen about the history of Liam's position as a royal guard. The Queen explained that royal guards were selected carefully and trained for years. They were expected to follow orders without hesitation, protect the palace at all costs, and uphold the traditions of the kingdom. She added that they also had to evaluate every visitor to ensure that respect and intentions were genuine. JD listened carefully, realizing why Liam had been cautious when he first arrived. JD thought back to the handshake at the gate. It was more than a simple greeting, it was a test of character. He now understood that a refusal was not a personal offense, but a reflection of Liam's duty and careful judgment. JD felt respect for the guard grow as he realized the strength required to remain firm in duty, even in the face of politeness or pressure from visitors. JD asked the Queen if he could see the training grounds where soldiers practiced. She agreed, and soon they walked through another part of the garden leading to a large open field. Soldiers in neat formation were practicing drills, moving in perfect synchronization. JD watched closely as they performed exercises with precision and skill. He noticed how every soldier was attentive, disciplined, and aware of their surroundings. Liam followed silently, keeping an eye on JD's reactions. JD was impressed by the level of coordination and discipline. "It is amazing how well trained they are," he said. "I can see that discipline and respect are the foundations of everything they do." The Queen smiled. "You understand well. A soldier is not only measured by strength or skill, but also by character, loyalty, and respect. Every action reflects their commitment to the kingdom. As they walked closer to the soldiers, JD realized that this was another chance to demonstrate his respect. He observed quietly, asking thoughtful questions, listening carefully, and avoiding judgmental statements. Liam's eyes flicked between JD and the soldiers, silently assessing whether JD's words and actions matched his respect. JD understood that his behavior now would influence the trust he could earn from the guard. The Queen explained that the HFY soldiers' training included teamwork, strategy, and understanding responsibility. Each soldier was expected to support the others and respect their commanders and peers. JD nodded thoughtfully, realizing that respect, loyalty, and discipline were interconnected. He admired the way the kingdom maintained these values through training and tradition. JD spent the next hour walking among the soldiers, observing, asking questions, and listening. Liam followed closely, still silent, still firm. But JD sensed that the guard's judgment was slowly softening. He understood that trust could not be forced. It had to be earned through patience, sincerity, and respect. Every small action mattered, and JD resolved to continue demonstrating his commitment to understanding and honoring the kingdom's traditions. By the time they returned to the palace garden, JD felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. He had learned much about the soldiers, their training, and the values they upheld. He also realized that earning Liam's respect would require more than words. He needed to show consistent respect, understanding, and humility. JD understood that this was the beginning of a journey, not just a visit. As JD looked at Liam, the guard remained silent and steady, but JD noticed a slight relaxation in his stance. It was subtle, but it was there. JD realized that progress had been made, even if the handshake at the gate was still unresolved. He understood that true respect required time, effort, and genuine understanding. JD smiled quietly to himself. He knew that the day was far from over, and that the next moments would be just as important as the first. He had learned that patience, humility, and careful observation were the keys to connecting with people from different cultures. Liam's silent assessment reminded him that respect could not be assumed, but had to be earned through action, thoughtfulness, and sincerity. JD Vance walked back into the palace, feeling the weight of the earlier handshake still pressing on his mind. The corridors were quieter now, with only a few attendants moving gracefully carrying trays of refreshments. The marble floor reflected the sunlight streaming through the large windows, making the palace feel grand and almost endless. JD tried to steady his thoughts. He knew that the first impression he had made with Liam had not been good, but he also understood that this was a chance to improve, to show his respect in every step he took. Liam followed behind as usual, standing tall and silent. JD could sense the guard's eyes on him, watching carefully. It was not a hostile gaze, but a test. Liam was trained to notice every detail, how a visitor moved, how they spoke, and how they behaved. JD realized that the guard's silence was not rejection, but judgment. He needed to be patient and show understanding through his words and actions. JD and the Queen entered a smaller room off the main hall. The room was decorated with elegant tapestries depicting important moments in the kingdom's history. Soldiers and citizens had been captured in heroic scenes, showing bravery, loyalty, and care for one another. JD studied each tapestry carefully, noticing the attention to detail. The Queen followed his gaze and smiled. "These tapestries tell the story of Eloria," she said. "They remind us of courage, sacrifice, and honor. Every person shown here contributed to the kingdom in a meaningful way." JD nodded, feeling a deep sense of respect. "It is incredible to see history preserved like this," he said. "It is not only art, but a story of values and dedication." The Queen's eyes brightened. "Exactly. And it is these values that every soldier and citizen carries forward. That is why respect and understanding are so important when visiting our kingdom. We value visitors who appreciate our traditions, not just our beauty." JD smiled politely, understanding her point. Liam stood quietly near the door, observing JD's gestures and expressions. The guard did not speak, but JD could feel his scrutiny. JD realized that every action mattered. how he stood, how he spoke, and even how he responded to the Queen. He remembered the failed handshake at the gate, and he felt a small pang of embarrassment. He had assumed the visit would be simple, but he now understood that respect was earned through patience, careful attention, and thoughtful interaction. The Queen led JD to a table with refreshments and invited him to sit. JD took a seat politely, trying not to fidget. Liam remained standing near the door, silent and firm, his gaze steady. JD felt the tension in the room. The failed handshake had created an awkward silence that lingered in his mind. He realized he could not ignore it, but he also knew that addressing it directly would be difficult. JD decided to continue showing respect through conversation. "Your Majesty, I would like to learn more about the values your soldiers hold dear," he said. "I have always admired courage, but I realize now that there is more to being a soldier than strength. Loyalty, respect, and honor are equally important." The Queen nodded approvingly. "You understand well, Mr. Vance. A soldier's character is as important as their skill. Without it, training and strength mean little. We teach our soldiers to value each other, to support one another, and to honor their responsibilities." JD listened carefully, absorbing every word. He asked about how soldiers were trained to work together, how they learned to respect each other, and how they were encouraged to act with integrity. The Queen explained that teamwork and discipline were the foundations of the army, but character was the heart of it. JD nodded, understanding that every action, no matter how small, reflected the values of the kingdom. Liam, still standing near the door, seemed to shift slightly. JD noticed the guard's eyes following him, assessing his sincerity. JD understood that Liam's role was not just protection, but judgment. He realized that the guard's silence was a challenge, one that JD needed to meet with patience, humility, and genuine respect. He decided to speak with honesty and thoughtfulness. "I have always believed that courage is important," JD said carefully, "but I now see that respect and loyalty are equally important. A soldier who lacks these cannot truly serve. I admire your soldiers for their discipline and dedication, and I hope to learn more from them today." The Queen's smile widened slightly. She could see JD's sincerity. Liam, however, remained silent, his posture firm, his judgment still cautious. JD realized that actions often spoke louder than words. He decided to show his respect by observing carefully, asking thoughtful questions, and remaining humble. He walked slowly around the room, studying the tapestries and decorations, commenting thoughtfully on each one. He asked the Queen about the people depicted in the paintings, their stories, and their contributions to the kingdom. The Queen appreciated his curiosity and attention to detail. Time passed quietly, but the tension in JD's mind remained. The handshake at the gate was still unresolved, and Liam's judgment still weighed heavily on him. JD understood that he could not rush respect or trust. He needed to continue acting with integrity, patience, and thoughtfulness. He made a mental note to remain mindful of every word he spoke and every gesture he made. JD asked the Queen if he could meet some of the younger soldiers who were being trained in the palace. She agreed, and soon they moved to a training hall. The soldiers were practicing drills, their movements precise and coordinated. JD watched closely, noticing the care and attention each soldier paid to their training. He asked questions about their routines, their values, and the lessons they learned from each exercise. Liam followed silently, observing both JD and the soldiers. JD noticed that the guard's gaze was less tense than earlier, but still cautious. JD understood that every step he took was being evaluated. He realized that patience and sincerity were essential. He decided to continue learning, listening, and showing respect through every action. JD spent the next hour talking to the young soldiers, asking questions about teamwork, discipline, and responsibility. He shared stories from his own experiences, focusing on lessons learned and the importance of respect and integrity. The soldiers listened attentively, and some even smiled at his stories. Liam remained at the back, silent but attentive, slowly observing JD's behavior. By the end of the visit to the training hall, JD felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. He had learned a great deal about the soldiers, their training, and the values they upheld. He had also realized that earning respect was not instantaneous. It required consistent demonstration of sincerity, patience, and understanding. Liam's judgment was still cautious, but JD sensed that his efforts were being noticed. As they returned to the palace garden, JD felt the sun warm on his face. He looked at Liam, who remained standing near the entrance to the hall. The guard's posture was still firm, but JD noticed a subtle relaxation in his stance. It was a small sign, but meaningful. JD understood that trust and respect were slowly being earned, and that every careful word and thoughtful gesture mattered. JD smiled quietly to himself. He knew that the day was far from over, and that the real challenge of earning Liam's trust would continue. He had learned that respect was not simply a handshake or a greeting. It was a combination of patience, humility, and consistent action. He was determined to continue showing his sincerity and understanding, no matter how long it took. JD's mind wandered briefly to the crowd outside the palace. The people of Eloria had welcomed him with curiosity and enthusiasm. He realized that his actions inside the palace reflected not only on him, but also on the impression he made on the citizens. Every careful step, every respectful word, and every thoughtful gesture mattered. He had to continue acting with integrity, demonstrating respect for the kingdom and its people. Liam's presence reminded him constantly that actions spoke louder than words. The guard's silence was not rejection but a challenge that JD accepted quietly, determined to meet with patience, sincerity, and understanding. He knew that the next moments in the palace could define the impression he left behind, and he was ready to continue his journey with humility and care. JD's respect for Liam grew with each passing minute. He realized that it was not easy to maintain discipline, observe every visitor, and evaluate their sincerity while remaining polite and professional. Liam's role was difficult, and JD admired the guard's strength and dedication. He understood that earning trust and respect required effort, patience, and consistent demonstration of sincerity. As the afternoon sunlight cast long shadows across the palace garden, JD felt a renewed determination. He would continue to learn, observe, and show respect through his words and actions. He understood that the handshake at the gate was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning of a journey toward mutual understanding and respect. JD Vance woke early the next morning, feeling the calm of the palace around him. The sun had just begun to rise, filling the sky with soft orange and pink hues. Birds chirped outside his window, and the gentle rustle of leaves added a quiet melody to the morning. JD knew that today would be another important day. He had learned much about the kingdom, its soldiers, and its values, but the challenge of earning Liam's trust remained. He understood that respect was not something that could be rushed. After breakfast, JD was led through a long hallway decorated with golden frames and paintings of past rulers. Each painting seemed to tell a story, and JD paused to admire the details. He asked the queen questions about the kings and queens who had shaped the kingdom. She answered patiently, sharing stories of courage, wisdom, and sacrifice. JD listened carefully, appreciating not only the history but also the lessons that could be learned from it. Liam walked silently behind, his footsteps soft but precise. JD felt the guard's presence keenly, aware that every move he made was being observed. The previous day had taught him that Liam's silence was not hostility but careful assessment. JD resolved to remain patient and respectful, understanding that actions mattered more than words. The queen led JD and Liam to the palace stables. Horses of all sizes and colors stood calmly in their stalls, their coats shining under the morning light. JD had always admired horses, and he felt a sense of excitement. These horses are trained to carry soldiers into battle, but they are also companions, the queen explained. Every soldier must treat them with care and respect. Trust between a horse and its rider is essential. JD nodded thoughtfully. It is clear that every part of your army values discipline and respect, even toward the animals that serve with them. The queen smiled. Exactly. Respect is not limited to people. It extends to all beings, to every action, and to every responsibility. That is what makes a true soldier. JD spent the next hour observing the soldiers in the stables. They groomed the horses, fed them, and spoke softly to them. Every movement was careful and deliberate. JD noticed how the soldiers treated the animals not as tools but as partners. He realized that respect and discipline were deeply rooted in the kingdom's values, extending beyond human interactions. Liam remained silent, but JD sensed the guard's eyes on him. He understood that this was another test, not of words but of observation and behavior. JD walked slowly, asking questions about the horses and the routines of the soldiers. He listened attentively, showing interest and genuine respect for their work. Liam's gaze shifted occasionally, measuring JD's sincerity. After the stables, the Queen guided them to a courtyard where soldiers practiced sword training. The clashing of wooden swords filled the air, and JD watched the soldiers carefully. Each movement was precise, controlled, and respectful. They followed strict rules, emphasizing discipline over aggression. JD realized that this training was not just about physical skill, but also about character. JD asked questions about the importance of respect in training. "Do soldiers ever compete against each other?" he asked. The Queen nodded. "Competition exists, but it is not about defeating others. It is about learning, improving, and respecting every partner. Winning without respect is meaningless. Our soldiers are taught to value teamwork, integrity, and honor above all else." JD reflected on his own experiences in life. He realized that he had sometimes overlooked the importance of patience and humility. Observing the soldiers reminded him that true strength came not only from skill, but also from character. Liam's presence reminded him constantly that respect had to be earned through consistent actions. The Queen then asked JD if he would like to try a simple training exercise. JD hesitated for a moment, feeling nervous, but nodded politely. A young soldier led him to a practice area and explained the basic movements. JD followed carefully, mimicking the soldier's actions. He focused on precision and respect, rather than speed or power. Liam stood nearby, silent, but JD could sense the guard observing every movement. As JD practiced, he realized how difficult it was to balance concentration, respect, and proper technique. He stumbled a few times, but he apologized politely each time and started again. The young soldier smiled encouragingly, and JD felt a small sense of accomplishment. Liam, however, remained composed, his expression unreadable. JD understood that this was a test of patience and humility. He needed to continue showing respect even when challenges arose. After the practice, the Queen guided JD and Liam to a small garden behind the training grounds. The garden was filled with flowers, fountains, and statues of past leaders. It was peaceful and serene. JD sat quietly on a bench, reflecting on what he had learned. He realized that respect was not a single act but a continuous process. Every step, word, and gesture mattered. Liam stood nearby, silent, but JD noticed a slight shift in the guard's stance. The tension had lessened, and there was a subtle acknowledgement in his gaze. JD understood that patience and sincerity were starting to have an effect. He smiled quietly to himself, knowing that the journey toward trust was still ongoing, but that progress had been made. The Queen joined JD on the bench. "You have shown patience and respect during your visit, Mr. Vance," she said. "True understanding comes from observing, learning, and acting with sincerity. You have demonstrated these qualities well today." JD felt a sense of pride, tempered with humility. He knew that while the Queen's praise was meaningful, the real test remained with Liam. JD decided to take one more step. He turned to Liam and spoke quietly. "I understand that respect cannot be forced. I also understand that actions speak louder than words. I hope that through patience and sincerity I can earn your trust." Liam remained silent for a moment. JD held his gaze calmly, showing humility and determination. Finally, Liam spoke, his voice steady and calm. "Respect is earned through consistent actions, Mr. Vance. You have shown patience, humility, and sincere interest. That is a good beginning. Keep this attitude and trust will follow." JD felt a wave of relief and gratitude. It was not the handshake at the gate, but it was a breakthrough. He understood that Liam's words represented recognition and acknowledgement of his efforts. JD spent the rest of the afternoon in the palace garden, continuing to observe, ask questions, and show respect through thoughtful conversation. Liam followed silently, but JD could sense a growing ease in the guard's presence. He realized that trust and respect required ongoing effort, and that small actions could have a significant impact. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the palace grounds, JD felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He had learned valuable lessons about patience, humility, and respect. He understood that earning trust was a journey, not a single moment. Liam's acknowledgement reminded him that sincerity and consistent effort mattered more than any words or gestures. JD looked at Liam and gave a polite nod. Liam returned the gesture with a slight smile, a small but meaningful sign of approval. JD knew that the handshake at the gate could happen in the future, but for now he had earned recognition through his actions. He felt a sense of connection and understanding that went beyond formal greetings. The Queen approached them one last time. "Mr. Vance, you have shown respect for our traditions, our soldiers, and our kingdom. Remember, true respect is continuous. Carry this lesson with you beyond these walls." JD nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He realized that the lessons learned in Aloria would stay with him forever. As JD prepared to leave the palace for the evening, he reflected on the day's experiences. The failed handshake, the observation of soldiers, and the interactions with Liam had taught him the importance of patience, humility, and respect. He understood that every small action mattered and that trust was built gradually, not assumed. Liam accompanied him to the palace gates. The guard's expression was calm and firm, but there was a subtle acknowledgement in his eyes. JD understood that this was progress, and he felt a renewed determination to continue acting with integrity and respect. The journey toward mutual understanding was not over, but the path had become clearer. As JD stepped out of the palace, he felt a sense of fulfillment. He had learned valuable lessons about respect, patience, and trust. He realized that these lessons were universal, applicable not only in Aloria but in every part of life. JD knew that the experiences with Liam and the soldiers would shape his understanding and actions for years to come. The next morning, JD Vance woke with a sense of quiet determination. Today was the final day of his visit to the palace, and he knew that it was the perfect opportunity to show the full measure of respect and understanding he had developed. The sunlight poured through his window, and the air was filled with the gentle hum of the palace awakening. JD took a deep breath, feeling calm but focused. He had learned patience, humility, and the importance of observing and respecting every detail of the kingdom. He dressed carefully, choosing simple, respectful clothing that would not stand out but would show thoughtfulness. As he walked through the palace halls, he felt the echoes of the previous days, the stables, the training grounds, the gardens. Each lesson and conversation had prepared him for this moment. He understood that respect was shown through consistent behavior, through attention to detail, and through genuine sincerity. The Queen was waiting in the main hall, accompanied by Liam. JD approached them with a polite bow. The Queen smiled warmly. "Good morning, Mr. Vance. Today is a day to reflect and to honor the lessons you have learned." JD nodded respectfully. He felt a quiet pride in the progress he had made, yet he remained humble, knowing that the journey toward mutual trust was still ongoing. Liam stood silently beside the Queen, his posture as firm as ever. JD could sense the guard's eyes on him, observing every movement. There was no tension now, only a careful watchfulness. JD understood that Liam's presence was a reminder that respect must be demonstrated continuously, not just in words but in every action. The Queen led them to a special courtyard, decorated with flowering trees, fountains, and benches. The area was serene, designed for reflection and peaceful conversation. JD took a seat on one of the benches while Liam remained standing, as was his custom. The Queen sat nearby, her presence calm and encouraging. "Mr. Vance," the Queen began, "your actions over the past days have shown patience, humility, and genuine respect. You have observed our soldiers, asked thoughtful questions, and demonstrated understanding. Today is a moment to acknowledge that effort." JD listened carefully, feeling a sense of calm satisfaction. He had worked hard to show sincerity, and now he felt that his efforts were recognized. JD glanced at Liam, whose expression remained neutral, but whose eyes carried a subtle acknowledgement. The guard had observed JD for days, and while he had not spoken much, his judgment was evident in the small gestures and glances that JD had come to notice. JD understood that the handshake that had failed on the first day was not just a simple greeting, but a symbol of earned trust. JD rose from the bench slowly, making sure his movements were steady and deliberate. He approached Liam with calm confidence, keeping his posture respectful and his hands visible. Liam's gaze followed him, sharp and focused, assessing every detail. JD's mind was clear. He knew that sincerity and patience were the keys to this moment, and he focused on demonstrating both. "Liam," JD said quietly but firmly, "I wish to show my respect properly today. I understand that trust and respect are earned, and I hope that my actions over the past days have demonstrated my sincerity." Liam's eyes studied JD carefully. For a moment there was silence, a quiet pause that felt heavier than words. JD stood patiently, keeping his demeanor calm, knowing that this moment required composure and understanding. Finally, Liam spoke. Mr. Vance, respect is not a matter of a single gesture. It is a reflection of consistent actions, patience, and humility. You have demonstrated these qualities. You have observed, listened, and acted with integrity. That is worthy of acknowledgement. JD felt a wave of relief and gratitude. He had expected challenges, but this recognition from Liam felt genuine and meaningful. JD extended his hand slowly, deliberately, keeping his posture respectful. Liam regarded him silently for a moment, then moved forward and shook JD's hand firmly. The handshake was confident, steady, and filled with acknowledgement. JD felt a profound sense of accomplishment, not because the handshake had finally occurred, but because it symbolized the respect and understanding that had been built over several days. The Queen smiled warmly at the scene. "This handshake is not merely a greeting," she said. "It represents trust, mutual respect, and the recognition of shared values. You have earned this moment through your patience, humility, and sincerity." JD nodded respectfully, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. He realized that the lessons of the past days would stay with him forever, shaping the way he approached not only formal visits but every interaction in his life. After the handshake, JD and Liam stood together side by side, observing the courtyard. The sun cast gentle shadows across the garden, and a soft breeze stirred the leaves. JD felt a quiet connection with Liam, one built on mutual respect rather than words alone. He realized that actions and integrity were more meaningful than simple greetings or polite conversation. JD took a moment to thank Liam personally. "I appreciate your guidance and your observation," he said sincerely. "Your presence has reminded me of the importance of respect and patience. I have learned much from watching and understanding." Liam's expression softened slightly. "You have shown awareness and humility, Mr. Vance. That is the foundation of trust and respect." JD nodded, feeling that this acknowledgement was more significant than any formal ceremony. The Queen invited JD to walk through the palace gardens one last time before his departure. As they strolled among the blooming flowers and fountains, JD reflected on the lessons he had learned. Every day had presented challenges, whether in the stables, the training grounds, or in interactions with the soldiers and Liam. Each challenge had required patience, humility, and careful observation. JD now understood that these qualities were the true measure of respect. Liam walked beside him silently, no longer just a figure of judgment but a quiet presence of acknowledgement. JD realized that the guard's initial refusal to shake hands had not been rejection, but a test, a way to ensure that respect was earned, not assumed. JD felt grateful for the opportunity to learn this lesson firsthand. As they reached the palace gates, JD paused to take one last look at the grand building, the marble floors, and the elegant towers. He felt a sense of connection to the place, not just for its beauty, but for the lessons it represented. The palace had taught him patience, humility, respect, and the value of earning trust through consistent actions. JD turned to the Queen and bowed respectfully. "Thank you for your guidance and for allowing me to witness the values of your kingdom firsthand. I will carry these lessons with me always." The Queen smiled kindly. "Remember, Mr. Vance, respect and trust are not one-time gestures. They are lifelong practices. Continue to act with sincerity and integrity, and you will carry these lessons beyond these walls." JD then turned to Liam. The guard stood tall and silent as always. JD extended his hand once more, not out of necessity, but as a final gesture of respect. Liam shook his hand firmly, a silent acknowledgement that spoke louder than words. JD felt a deep sense of completion, knowing that the journey of earning trust had reached a meaningful milestone. Before leaving, JD took a moment to observe the people gathered outside the palace. Citizens of Eloria waved politely and some smiled warmly. JD realized that his actions had not only earned respect within the palace, but had also made a positive impression on the people. He understood that respect and sincerity were universal, affecting not just individuals but communities. As JD walked away from the palace, he felt a sense of calm and fulfillment. He had arrived as a visitor unsure of the customs and expectations, and he was leaving as someone who had learned the true meaning of respect, patience, and humility. The handshake with Liam was more than a simple greeting. It was a symbol of understanding, trust, and the value of consistent, thoughtful actions. JD reflected on the lessons he had learned. Patience matters. Humility is powerful. and respect must be earned through genuine actions. He realized that these values were universal, applicable not only in formal visits to a palace but in everyday life. Each interaction, each choice, and each gesture carried the potential to build trust and respect. As the sun set behind the palace, casting warm orange and pink light across the gardens and towers, JD felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had come seeking understanding, and he was leaving with lessons that would last a lifetime. The journey had been challenging, but it had also been rewarding. Filled with moments of observation, reflection, and growth, JD Vance smiled quietly to himself, knowing that he had not only earned a handshake, but had gained something far more meaningful. The understanding that true respect is earned, trust is built through consistent actions, and integrity shines brighter than words alone. With a final glance at the palace, he walked forward, ready to carry these lessons into the world beyond the gates.